distinguished audience from around the world, good morning from Turkey. It is an honor to welcome you all to another webinar of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. This time, we are organizing it jointly with the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law from Malta. The Antalya Diplomacy Forum is an initiative created and further developed by Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu of Turkey. ADF, with the acronym, aims to provide a platform where issues shaping the global and regional agenda to be discussed with a view to seeking for solutions. The world is facing an unprecedented global health and economic crisis. In the wake of these tremendously challenging times, Antalya Diplomacy Forum is co-hosting webinars in cooperation with prominent international think tanks and organizations with the participation of distinguished speakers. Today's topic is a very relevant one: counter-terrorism efforts under pandemic conditions. Counter-terrorism efforts have been high on the agenda of the international community in recent decades. The prevention of the movements of foreign terrorist fighters has become a particular priority. There is no doubt that issues related to the repatriation, prosecution, and rehabilitation of the FTFs require further attention. Some argue that terrorist groups will be more hesitant to carry out their activities, while others suggest that they will take more space to act under present circumstances. We have a wonderful panel today to discuss these and many other issues. Our distinguished panelists include His Excellency Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Turkey and co-host for today. His Excellency Minister Evalis Bartolo, Minister for European and Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Malta and co-host today. His Excellency Sheikh Dr. Ahmed Nasser Al Mohammed Al Sabah, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Kuwait. And last but not least, His Excellency Stef Blok, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand the mic to co-moderator of the event, my friend, to Mr. Thomas Wüchte, Executive Secretary of the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law, and co-moderator of today's webinar.
Thank you, Ambassador Karagos. Good morning to all of you from Malta. My name is Thomas Wüchte. I'm the Executive Secretary of the International Institute for Justice and Rule of Law, or the IIJ as it's commonly known. I would like to express our thanks to the Antalya Diplomacy Forum for inviting the IIJ to co-host this webinar, and to all of you for joining us today. For those not familiar with the IIJ, we are one of 3 institutions inspired by the Global Counter-Terrorism Forum. The IIJ was established in 2014 to deliver impactful capacity building to criminal justice practitioners on how to address terrorism and related transnational activities within a rule of law framework. Our work is guided by an international governing board of 13 countries in the European Union, which I'm proud to say includes the governments of Kuwait, Malta, the Netherlands, and Turkey. In just 6 years, the IIJ has worked with over 6,000 practitioners from over 100 countries and has delivered over 150 tailored counterterrorism capacity building programs. With the impact of the COVID-19 health pandemic and a global pivot to the online environment, the IIJ is delivering its innovative and tailored programming virtually. This includes programs under the IIJ Programming Unit, which delivers short course capacity building addressing emerging terrorism challenges. And this year, in a very exciting way, it includes our new IIJ Academic Unit, which next month begins delivering long-form, 2-week foundational counterterrorism skills courses. Though many practitioners in our geographic focus areas have been heavily restricted in their daily activities due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the threat of terrorism has not waned. The topic of today's webinar is thus both timely and important. We have a very distinguished panel of experts, and I know we are all here to hear from you on your insights and experience. So with that, I will give the floor to His Excellency Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Turkey. Sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mukhtar. My dear colleagues and friends, Stef, Sheikh Ahmed, and Evaris, ladies and gentlemen, First of all, let me thank Antalya Diplomacy Forum and International Institute for Justice and Rule of Law for organizing this webinar. Let me also thank Everest for co-hosting this event, and our colleagues also, Sheikh Ahmed and Steph, for joining us today. Terrorism is an evolving threat to all of us, and COVID-19 also had an impact on it. Allow me to elaborate on a couple of points. The global economy is shrinking, putting more pressure on the limited financial resources in the fight against terror. With less resources available, countries concentrate on their own security rather than a global response to terrorism. Unemployment is on the rise, opening the way for more radicalism and extremism, including far-right extremism. Increasing social imbalances also fuel extremism and terrorism. Foreign assistance to migrants and IDPs is diminishing, making these groups more vulnerable. Vulnerable countries, mostly LDCs, had to shift their focus towards fighting the pandemic rather than terrorism. Dear friends, dear colleagues, these new realities can easily be exploited by terrorists. The increased Daesh and Al-Qaeda activities in Africa is really worrying. We should stick to our holistic strategies and concrete action plans to counter terrorism. Obviously, we should continue our fight by striking a right balance between security and freedoms. Our counter efforts shouldn't create new arguments that can be exploited by terrorists. It is also essential to avoid double standards. A terrorist group cannot be a partner in the fight against another terrorist group. We shouldn't ignore a terrorist organization just because it only threatens others, but not us. We shouldn't disregard terrorists just because we ascribe to them the same ideology. It is also crucial to avoid steps that would legitimize terrorism and its propaganda. Unfortunately, this is happening in many parts of the world at this moment. Terrorists shouldn't be allowed to abuse freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is more than welcome, but we shouldn't let terrorist organizations to abuse that. We also have to act together to prevent their financing of terrorism. We should address the root causes of terrorism and radicalization. The pandemic shouldn't lead to additional difficulties that can be abused by terrorists. The issue of foreign terrorist fighters shouldn't lose our attention due to the pandemic as well. Foreign terrorist fighters need to be repatriated to face justice and be rehabilitated. Dear friends, dear colleagues, as Secretary General Guterres rightly pointed out, like the virus, terrorism doesn't respect national borders. Therefore, collective action and stronger commitment is needed to tackle this global menace. With decades-long experience in the fight against terror, Turkey will continue to contribute to the global counter-terrorism efforts. Let me stop here and looking forward answering questions and also looking forward the address of my dear colleagues. Thank you.
Monique. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'd now like to invite His Excellency Mr. Everest Bartolo, the Minister of Foreign and European Affairs of the Republic of Malta, to take the floor. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good morning from Malta as well. Dear Mevlut, dear Steph, dear Sheikh Ahmed, dear colleagues. As a government of Malta, we are very pleased to be participating and co-hosting this important high-level webinar alongside the Antalya Diplomacy Forum and the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law. As many of you will be aware, Malta enjoys a special relationship with the IIJ, We are proud to host the IIJ headquarters in our capital city, Valletta, and we are also a founding member along with the government of Turkey, and we are vigorously supporting the IIJ mission and vision through grants and other forms of support. We are proud of what the IIJ has and is achieving, particularly during the challenges of this global pandemic. Not only has the Institute maintained its operational continuity during these unprecedented times, but the Institute has shown leadership, convening regular meetings of a consortium of partner organizations to share lessons learned and innovations amid these challenges. The threat of terrorism, as Mevlut has already said, continues to evolve. And the COVID-19 global health pandemic has added yet another layer of complexity as terrorist organizations shift their activities to adapt and to take advantage of the pandemic's wide-ranging impacts. The pandemic has undoubtedly affected our health, our economies, and our societies. However, it has also reshaped the world's notion of safety and security and these as threats. As was outlined by the newly adopted European Security Union strategy, the current pandemic has highlighted the need to guarantee security both in the physical and digital environments. We continue and intend to strengthen our support to help partners in our neighborhood and in the extended neighborhood, such as the Sahel, to build their institutional capacities to address terrorist threats as well as other criminal activity, such as people smuggling. Support to partners in the rule of law and border management, and to enable them to protect their own populations is a key endeavor. The safety, prosperity, and well-being of citizens depend on being secure. Ensuring the safety of our citizens and societies cannot be achieved through unilateralism. States on their own cannot sufficiently ensure the security against long-established threats such as terrorism that continue to evolve. Despite the fact that the number of terrorist attacks did not experience significant growth since the pandemic, and the threat of terrorism has somewhat declined in some parts of the globe, the situation is unlikely to endure. The threat of jihadist attacks from or inspired by Daesh and Al-Qaeda and their affiliates still remains high. In parallel, the threat of violent right-wing and left-wing extremism are also growing. At the end of the day, terrorism is also about risk management, managing a risk to which our societies are particularly averse. This is, after all, the aim of terrorists, manipulating public opinions and influencing policy by instilling fear. We all saw how the world's dependency on digital infrastructures, technologies, and online systems surged during the COVID, and this dependency will not diminish anytime soon. The ever-increasing dependency on digitalization has allowed us to create business, consume products, and enjoy services, but it has also made us aware that the internet is vulnerable. After all, like other technologies, the internet is not neutral. It is used by people both for, for good and for harm. It's how it's used that is important. In fact, various violent extremist groups have been particularly shrewd in exploiting the coronavirus crisis, blaming minority groups, spreading disinformation through the internet in order to expand their breeding grounds for radicalization. Internet vulnerabilities during the COVID-19 pandemic have truly underlined the strategic importance of cybersecurity. However, the global pandemic has significantly underscored how social divisions and uncertainties lead to greater vulnerabilities in already vulnerable societies. Altogether, the pandemic has unraveled further numerous issues and vulnerabilities within our societies that are threatening to turn the current health and economic crisis into a security crisis. The international community must prevent this scenario from happening at all costs. In concluding, I would like to personally thank my friend Mevlut, the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, and the Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law for this invitation extended to me and the opportunity to participate in this very timely discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to now invite His Excellency Sheikh Ahmad Nasser Al Mohammed Al Sabah, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Kuwait. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas, and I'd like at the outset to say hello and good morning to all the participants, Their Excellencies, and I'd like to apologize for that His Excellency now is engaged with another meeting at this very moment, and he will join us shortly. I would highly appreciate if we alternate with His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Netherlands, and by that time, His Excellency Sheikh Dr. Ahmed Al Sabah will be available and joining us. Thank you.
Jij beweegt.
Mr. Buck, the floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to be able to talk with you, Mevlut and Evarist, and then later on Sheikh Ahmed. It's indeed a great pleasure to attend today's webinar on counter-terrorism efforts under pandemic conditions. And I'd like to thank the Antalya Diplomacy Forum and the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law, as well as, of course, Mevlut and Everest for their kind invitation. And as Mevlut has said before, the pandemic has not only fundamentally affected social relations, but has also had a radical impact on strategic relations around the world. Under these extraordinary circumstances, it's reassuring that the Antalya Diplomacy Forum has succeeded in bringing us together around this digital table to share our views on the current crisis. And after all, this is a situation that affects us all. We find ourselves in an uncharted territory in a world full of uncertainties. Right now, the only thing we know for sure is that this pandemic is far from over. The crisis has made travel and personal interaction a much greater challenge. But the positive side of this is that it's also restricting the movement of terrorists and terrorist organizations. We have yet to fully come to terms with the implications of COVID-19, but we can already see that the pandemic has the potential to seriously undermine social cohesion and exacerbate existing grievances and fuel conflict. And this could create fertile soil for radicalization and violent extremism. The increased activity on extremist online platforms that we've witnessed in the past few months is an alarming indication of what might be heading our way. Terrorist organizations could benefit from growing dissatisfaction in society with how governments are responding to the pandemic. And this anger and frustration is being further fueled by the deliberate spread of disinformation and conspiracy theories. And this is a worrying development because it threatens to further erode the legitimacy of governments, especially in countries that are already struggling with governance challenges. And this, of course, raises the question of how to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups in order to prevent further escalation of unrest and instability in the years to come, at home and abroad. The Dutch counter-terrorism policy has always sought to combine preventive and reactive measures to fight radicalism and violent extremism. And in this dual approach, we use security measures to protect people and organizations that could become the target of the attacks. And on the preventive side, for example, we involve teachers and youth workers so they can help identify signs of radicalization. We also provide them with community-based instruments and other tools to prevent it. The pandemic could be a breeding ground for radicalization, which in turn could lead to terrorism. So it's vital that we nip it in the bud with effective preventive measures. But preventing violent extremism requires multiple institutions to work together. And Mevlut will no doubt back me up on this, as many Turkish institutions are working hard to that end in a region that's still facing several terrorism-related challenges. This is why we need to redouble our efforts. Simply plugging the holes will not suffice. In the coming years, the Netherlands intends to invest more than 20 million euros, directly and indirectly, in programs and projects aimed at preventing and countering violent extremism. For example, to provide prison staff in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tunisia, in Morocco, with tools to prevent radicalization in prisons. And to combat and prevent financing of terrorism by reinforcing capacities on financial intelligence, for instance in North Macedonia, in cooperation with our own financial intelligence unit. So together we can make a difference. This pandemic has shaken the foundations of our social order and the security landscape in many ways. And there's a real risk of terrorists and violent extremists developing strategies to exploit this. So we must step up and coordinate our efforts more closely to ensure success. And our dialogue today can help us to do exactly that. So I'd like to finish by returning to Mevlut's words, which I mentioned at the start. Yes, strategic relations are changing the world in these times of crisis, but in my view, productive cooperation on counter-terrorism issues, like that between the Netherlands and Turkey, is the only way we can jointly tackle these growing terrorism concerns during this pandemic. So I sincerely hope we can continue working together to tackle the challenges that come our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and I'm glad to see that our last speaker, His Excellency Sheikh Dr. Ahmad Nasser Al Mohammed Al Sabah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Kuwait, is here for his presentation. Sir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My brother Maulud Jawish Oglu, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Turkey, co-host of the webinar. His Excellency Mr. Avaris Bartolo, Minister of European and Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Malta, co-host of the webinar. Your Excellency, my friend Mr. Steve Blok, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Netherlands. Mr. Thomas Wokte, Executive Secretary of the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law. Your Excellency Murad Karakoz, Ambassador Coordinator of Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. First of all, I would like to extend my appreciation to all the coordinators for the kind invitation to participate in this important event, especially in light of the outbreak of coronavirus pandemic worldwide and the increasing number of fatalities. The importance lie in how to continue in these delicate conditions to preserve the efforts of the international community in combating terrorism and the positive results recently achieved, as well as following up with the accelerating development internationally. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend the role of the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law in combating the threat of terrorism and its repercussions. I reassure you that the state of Kuwait is working through its membership and active role in the governing board of administrators of the Institute in order to confront the crowd of extremism and develop the means and capabilities to combat terrorism. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to recall the role of State of Kuwait in supporting the efforts of the international community in its battle against COVID-19. Kuwait has provided approximately $290 million to the global fight against COVID-19 and to contain and prevent the spread of this virus and to limit its consequences. These contributions go hand in hand with the ongoing relief role of Kuwait in supporting the refugees and those in need in many countries, and its work on promoting security and stability in areas of conflict. We also value efforts of the international organization to ease the suffering in conflict area and international collaboration to find a common vision in combating terrorism and its financing. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, terrorism still constitutes a great threat to international peace and security and has resulted in destruction and the spread of abnormal thoughts disseminated among foreign fighters who have returned from regions of conflict. Such fighters embrace ideologies that have no connection to Islam. On the contrary, these ideologies are an opposite to what Islam stands for and its social and moral values. Our societies are still facing the negative effects of such deviant thoughts that contravene with our way of life, the most dangerous of which is the intellectual deviation spreading extremism among youth and embracing of ideas that estrange them from moderation and compassion, two of the most valuable traits of our religion. The state of Kuwait urges the international community to adopt policies that guarantee the repatriation of their citizens from conflict areas. Kuwait has taken significant steps to combat terrorism and ideological extremism, worked diligently to ensure suitable cultural and rehabilitating programs for the returnees from the conflict zones and engage them with civil societies. We are all required to pay greater attention to strengthening international partnership and work on the synchronized pace to achieve further success to eradicate terrorism, dry up its resources and finances, and provide full support to the maintenance of peace and security. In guise of conclusion, I reiterate my gratitude to all participants in this forum and assure you that the State of Kuwait will not hesitate to play its part and contribute to any effort aimed at consolidating international peace and security. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. On behalf of all the participating ministers, allow me to thank again our very distinguished panel of speakers for your unique and timely insights. We are very fortunate to have heard directly from the ministers on how your respective countries are responding to the impact and implications of the COVID-19 health pandemic. For all of us in the counterterrorism field, it is very encouraging to hear that, despite the pandemic, international efforts to counter terrorism and violent extremism continue with new innovative ways in these unprecedented times. We are all aware of the effects of terrorism around the world. The threat is daunting, and as noted, the dynamics are complex and the challenges are evolving. The threat requires an international response, and the IIJ, along with others, is playing a key role in strengthening that cooperation, which was mentioned by many of you. And for many, the pandemic, as has noted by the Foreign Minister of Malta, has added an extra layer of complexity as terrorist organizations seek to adapt and take advantage of its impacts. With that in mind, the IIJ has been keen and remains committed to the delivery of its capacity building programs along the lines of many of the issues that were mentioned by you, such as balancing freedoms, finding the right balance overall, terrorism financing, returning foreign terrorist fighters, information communications technology, and such things as referral mechanisms for rehabilitation and reintegration. In the spirit, as was noted, strategic relations and international cooperation. It's now my pleasure to give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Karagos, who will moderate the second panel, during which the ministers will be responding to questions with regard to their national approach. Ambassador Karagos, the floor is yours, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Thomas Lükte. I also would like to thank distinguished ministers for their initial remarks. Now we will start the second part of our webinar. We will be posing some specific questions to distinguished ministers, and then I'll be asking their answers. And let me start with Turkey. Minister Çavuşoğlu, Your Excellency, we know that Turkey has been fighting against a number of terrorist organizations. It possesses substantial experience and capacity in that respect. Turkey's geographical location renders its role pivotal in the fight against Daesh. Nevertheless, some claim that Turkey is largely focusing on combating PKK and Fethullahist terrorist organization rather than Daesh, since they are regarded as more imminent threats. Could you kindly elaborate on this? Is this true, this perception, Your Excellency?
Ambassador Karagos, I just mentioned in my opening remarks that we should avoid double standards in our fight against terrorism. And Turkey has been fighting many terrorist organizations with different ideologies, and Turkey is supporting many other countries and the platforms to fight different kind of terrorist organizations with different ideologies. I just mentioned African countries as well. First of all, Turkey has been a major threat for Daesh. As a predominantly Muslim nation with a vibrant democracy, Turkey poses the greatest threat to Daesh twisted ideology. The Daesh presence in Syria was a serious threat for Turkey, more than any other country, obviously. Due to Daesh attacks, we lost 309 lives, while more than 1,300 of our citizens were wounded. Thanks to our counter-terrorism operations in Syria, we cleared our immediate vicinity from this threat, together with PKK, YPG terrorism, of course. Indeed, we were the only allied nation that put its troops on the ground to fight Daesh. We have cleared Daesh from an area of 2,000 square kilometers in Syria and 3,000 terrorists with the Euphrates Shield operation in 2016. And we also eliminated about 800 Daesh terrorists in Iraq. They didn't only invite Syria, but they also invited the big majority of the territories of Iraq. We also carry out operations within Turkey against Daesh. Only last year, we conducted about 1,500 operations, because there are many foreign terrorist fighters as well. I will mention this maybe later. And Turkey is an active member of global coalition against Daesh, together with the countries, and we have been participating in the meetings together, and is co-chairing the working group on foreign terrorist fighters. To prevent the movement of the foreign terrorist fighters in our fight against Daesh, we put almost 100,000 individuals on our no-entry list. Of course, many of those names came from allies and friends or the source countries. So we deported more than 8,000 foreign terrorist nationals suspected of terrorist-related activities to the source countries. And we have risk analysis units operating in different provinces, major airports, bus and train stations, and they have screened over 30,000 passengers, interviewed almost 20,000 of them. And there is still a large number of foreign nationals at our removal centers. Cooperation with the countries of origin, of course, remains essential on these people. So Turkey actively supports the international community's efforts to combat Daesh. And as a matter of fact, by its own example, Turkey undermines ideologies of Daesh and Al-Qaeda type of terror groups, which abuse our sacred religion, Islam. And we should continue killing their evil ideologies altogether. So what I am trying to say, of course, we have to fight all sorts of terrorism without any discrimination. It is very clear that Daesh and Al-Qaeda type of terrorist organizations are posing threat not only to Turkey in Syria, but many African countries and also many countries in the world where many foreign terrorist fighters join our planning to join this kind of terrorist organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for focusing on this issue and elaborating on Turkey's fight against Daesh. Now I will turn to, again, another co-host of this meeting, namely Malta. Mr. Minister Bartolo, multilateral efforts are key to overcome major challenges that the international community encounters. The combat against terrorism is one of those areas that countries and international organizations need to coordinate their activities. We come across different views and approaches on the European Union's role in the field of security, among others. Those debates concern, inter alia, EU approaches as well as cooperation with third parties. So in this vein, how could the cooperation between the EU countries and non-EU counterparts be improved in the field of counter-terrorism, sir?
Thank you, dear Ambassador. I'm understanding terrorism in the broader context, which includes terrorism financing originating from third states, radicalization, and the prevention of terrorist attacks. And obviously this fight cannot be carried out, as we have already said, at just the national level. And the EU works together with third states to also tackle terrorist threats emanating from within and outside its borders to tackle foreign terrorists, acting alone or in group, regardless of the ideology that is being pursued by terrorist means. But here I must say a word of warning. Historical experience shows us that it is easier to wage war and win it rather than to restore peace. Short-sighted regime change destroys an old order without creating a new one, and making a state fail and institutions collapse allows terrorists to thrive. From the external point of view, the EU promotes security and stabilization of countries where the state and the civilian authorities are not present. Now, this brings me to the above point, whereby the security of the Union is linked directly and intrinsically to the stability outside Europe. And I must say that sometimes, as a Maltese, the nearest country to Africa from the European Union, we struggle to put the Mediterranean and North Africa on the agenda. There's too much focus, and I can understand it, for the Eastern neighborhood and for what happens, especially vis-à-vis Russia, and we forget that the southern border of the European Union is in the Mediterranean. So we continue to draw the attention of what is happening in the immediate neighborhood. The European Union agenda on security and the global strategy on foreign and security policy for the EU highlights this internal-external security nexus and prioritizes cooperation with the Western Balkans, Turkey, the Middle East, and Africa, especially North Africa. But here again, I must say, rather than preaching and pointing accusing fingers, we must support the difficult work of state building. We must continue to support counter-terrorist measures for the security of Europe, because, for example, from the Horn of Africa up to the Sahel and North Africa, it certainly affects the EU's immediate neighborhood. Traffickers and smugglers of migrants and goods into Libya benefit from instability and the absence of state. And at this point, I must say, I must praise the Libyan minister, Fathi Bashaga, for the brave actions he is taking to dismantle the network of organized economic crime in Libya. As we meet, Libya is facing a very delicate situation this morning following the arrest of Al-Bija, one of the prime human smugglers, and there are militias mobilizing to try and release him from the action that the Minister of the Interior has taken. I really hope that the brave efforts that he's making, will bear the necessary fruit. Turning to Mali, armed and goods into Libya benefit from instability and the absence of state. The Malian armed forces are ongoing structural reforms, and the security apparatus is under high pressure for this reason. The EU needs to step up to support the armed forces. Bamako is undergoing a transitional process, and the EU's actions benefit all for the European security and cooperation to help counter terrorism. In the past, and we have a bit of nostalgia for this, EU Sofia hosted a pilot project known as Crime Information Cell, where it gathered information on human traffickers and intelligence, gathering the information about radicals and potential terrorists within Libya. We support also the idea that UBM Libya can take a leading role in countering terrorism by working and cooperating with UCAP, Sahel, and other missions as part of the regional cooperation of the EU missions. And even here, I must say that the EU lacks a comprehensive plan to support Libya. It's not fair to see Libya as the source of the migration problem in Europe. It is a transit country, and I think we're not helping Libya enough in facing such a formidable challenge. Needless to say, the mission of the EU are not just limited to the Sahel and Africa, but also in the Western Balkans. Lastly, with the support of the network of counter-terrorism, security experts in different EU delegations The external services of the EU and the European Commission are developing operational cooperation through different agencies such as the Europol, CEPOL, Frontex, as well as Eurojust. The EU cooperates also with international organizations, including the UN and Interpol, and works strategically with its partners, including the US and the UK. But ultimately, as we all know, we will be judged by results and by our actions rather than by our words. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Minister, for the comprehensive answer and the genuine assessment about EU's policies. Now I will turn to Kuwait. Before I give the floor to Minister El Sabah, let me express on behalf of Antalya Diplomacy Forum our deepest condolences for the passing away of the late Emir Sheikh Jabir El Emir El Sabah and congratulate the new Emir Sheikh Nawaf El Sabah. Mr. Minister, if I may, tackling foreign terrorist fighters has been a recurrent theme in the fight against terrorism. Issues ranging from their detention conditions in Syria to the security risks they pose and the challenges associated with their repatriation and rehabilitation have come to the forefront. The question as to how they could be brought to justice remains central to the debates. Besides, it makes the situation more complicated that countries maintain different views on the best possible ways of handling this issue. We would like to hear the perspective of a regional country. Let me ask what Kuwait's stance is regarding the repatriation of foreign terrorist fighters in Syria by source countries, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And allow me just in the beginning to thank you and to thank all of my colleagues, dear ministers, for this invitation, long-standing invitation. And we hope that in future years ahead that we can hold this meeting in person in beautiful Antalya. I would like also, as now it's my second time, to extend my deepest condolences to all those who fell under COVID-19 from all of the countries of distinguished guests here, and also to wish a speedy recovery to all those who are under treatment. I would like also in this regard to express our deepest gratitude from the leadership and the government and the people of Kuwait to all of you who extended your words of sympathy for the late His Highness Sheikh Sabah. And to reassure you that Kuwait will continue on his legacy and his policy of tolerance and consensus and bridge gapping amongst nations. Among the legacy that we will continue with Sheikh Sabah, it's our fervent support for the coalition against Daesh and Kuwait as a permanent and frivolous member in this coalition. Regarding your important question, I would like to tackle it from 2 points, Your Excellency. One point is from the principled matter. As a member of the coalition against Daesh, and as all of us have contributed one way or another to combat Daesh, either in Syria or in Iraq or in other countries as well, in terms of awareness, in terms of education, in terms of media, and in terms of rehabilitation as well. Kuwait do believe that it's responsibility upon member states to relieve the countries affected by Daesh, either Syria or Iraq, and to bring them to justice, for them to meet the light of day in tribunals, in fair tribunals, but also to provide them with means and ways to rehabilitate themselves and to make less damage to either to Syria, Iraq, but also to all countries in the world. Kuwait do believe that this really necessitates a collective effort of the whole world, and this matter, that it's still a debatable matter, we think that it will only reach us into somewhat of a quagmire that we really don't need in this time and moment. We should all have a clear understanding of our responsibilities and our engagement and our rights in this combat against terrorism, and for this matter to be clear. From a pragmatical point of view, and this is my second aspect, we have all been a member and actively engaged in combating terrorism to relieve Syria, but also Iraq, from all of the evil, and as my friend Maulud said, the twisted minds and actions of those who are under the influence of Daesh. Now, the detention facilities are facing numerous challenges to accommodate them and to provide them with the basic elements of livelihood there. It comes in a very clear contrast of our message to the Syrian people and also to Iraq. So from a pragmatical point of view, there is this contradictory message that we need to clarify it as well. Kuwait has done further steps in helping those in the detention facilities in Iraq from various nationalities to go back to their homeland via Kuwait. And we will continue with that, as well as if there is any Kuwaiti citizen still member of this evil organization, Kuwait will take upon its task to put him or her into to justice and provide them with the legal framework. Thank you so much, Excellency.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minister, for the enlightening answer, as well as kind words attributed to the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Now, I will turn to another European country, namely Netherlands, and will pose my question to Minister Blok. Sir, the rise of the growing number of right-wing terrorist attacks across the globe in recent years is one of the many worrying trends within extremism itself. For example, last year's attacks in the United States and New Zealand. These types of attacks have the potential to inspire copycat behavior across the globe. The terrorism situation and the trend report of Europol refers to the reported cases of right-wing terrorist attacks in the EU member states, and also underscores the fact that the perpetrators of such attacks are part of transnational communities and take inspiration from one another. In the context of right-wing threat, it is also stated that several EU member states even reported the emergence of paramilitary groups. Such indicators would allow us to talk about a real and increasing threat. And in view of this, what is your assessment, Mr. Minister, on the rise of far-right extremism and the associated threat of terrorism in the Western countries in particular, sir?
Thank you. That's a very relevant question. Of course, any form of extremism, be it right, left, religious, poses a certain danger to society. And unfortunately, the threat of right-wing extremism is present across the globe, not even particularly focused on Western countries alone. When speaking from the experience in my country, the Netherlands, right-wing terrorist attack by an online-inspired loner is still conceivable. Well-known groups generally have little influence, are divided, mainly see connections with current social teams. The small right-wing extremist groups are largely active with intimidating and radical actions that cause unrest within Muslim communities, among others. However, online developments, possibly fueled by the pandemic situation in which we find ourselves these days, are different. A whole new generation has emerged, which is not likely to become a member of what they consider to be an old-fashioned group. They will rather get in contact with right-wing extremist ideas in online channels. And this can contribute to the genesis of a social ecosystem where the threshold for discussing violent actions is low. And these developments are, of course, closely monitored by the security partners, and where necessary, actions are taken to mitigate the threat. And the government of the Netherlands is very committed to counteract the right-wing extremists that threaten us and to prevent people from radicalizing. The local and person-oriented approach is used in cases of radicalization or right-wing extremist expressions by individuals, with the aim of recognizing the threat posed by a person and intervening accordingly. And at the national level, the government is very committed to prevent terrorist and extremist expressions, both online and offline, from taking hold of our society. In the event of extremist behavior that leads to suspicion of a criminal offense, the Public Prosecution Office can initiate a criminal investigation and, if appropriate, proceed to prosecution. In recent years, efforts have been made to increase knowledge and skills among professionals nationally and locally who have to deal with this phenomenon. And given the fact that the threat of right-wing terrorism involves us all, and that the threat does not stop at any of our borders, I would like to extend a wish to further exchange our experiences and our governmental efforts to prevent and counter this specific threat in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Minister, for your kind and comprehensive answer. Now, Excellencies, distinguished audience, we have come to the end of the webinar. I would like to extend my cordial thanks to honorable ministers for taking their time, and I guess we use our time quite economically. In shorter than 1 hour, we covered a lot. And also, I would like to thank the wonderful audience as well. My thanks go also to the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law for being our partner today. And of course, Mr. Thomas Wüchte, the Executive Secretary, for sharing the co-moderation of this panel today. We are so glad that this webinar provided a good occasion to exchange opinions on a very relevant topic with regional and international dimensions. Q&A session showed us that we focused on many aspects of these issues, namely fighting against the notorious terrorist organization, Daesh, international cooperation with a particular emphasis on the European Union, repatriation issue, as well as rising right-wing terrorism. So to close, on behalf of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, we send our greetings to all of you and hope to see you all next year, hopefully in spring in Antalya. Thank you so much.